got
I'm
bombed.
a propagandist.
Well, no,
For the record.
No, I'm not calling
I'm a
you that.
propagandist.
I'm just saying. I'm going to play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay, well then, I want to
I'm saying I am.
I just
before
want to
you
put
even play it. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news and
Since when? He doesn't have the integrity afterwards to then admit he's wrong.
I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So
What? Now Hasan has now gone on Piers Morgan, which is, I suppose, quite big for Hasan, really. I don't think he's ever been on a show that big before. So I suppose that's pretty huge in and of itself. And from what I hear, he's not exactly done that good of a job. I tried to stay clear of clips because I was like, I want to react on stream just raw to this.
Well, now the battle of the hearts and minds, traditionally played out through diplomacy and propaganda, is being played out online. My next guest has almost 500 million views for his provocative commentary online, making him hugely influential. Hasan Piker streams live under the name Hasan Abi. His analysis of the Israel-Hamas war has taken a highly critical stance towards Israel and Western media, and he's been calling me out for my coverage.
Because he only cares about Israeli citizens. He does not care about Palestinians as human beings. That's why it's apples to oranges. It's like one side is a human, the other side is a barbaric monster child.
I never said that, obviously. He says that he'd like nothing more than to come on to Uncensored and call me a baboon in a suit to my face. Well, here I am, a baboon, and he can join me now. I'm joined by Hasan. Hasan, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
thank you for having me, Piers. It's very early here in Los Angeles, California, but I'm going to try to do my very best to not do my British accent while I'm here.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, I appreciate you coming on. Explain to me why you consider me a stenographer for the Israeli government, given that in the last week, I think more than any other host in the world, I have given lengthy platforms to pro-Palestinian voices to articulate that side of the argument.
No, I do have to commend you. You certainly
wonder
have
if it's gonna be
had
as
more
meat.
pro-Palestinian voices.
I wonder if he's going to be as mealy-mouthed when it's with the Ethan Klein debate. Remember when Hasan then pivoted to something else or tried to change the subject and just kind of waffled and rambled and gave these almost politician answers? You know, when you ask a politician a question and they go, well, you know, I think the real thing that people want to know about is, and then talk about something different and everything. Anyway, let's crack on.
I have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices than the rest of the British media and certainly the rest of Western media in general. Now, as far as saying that you're a stenographer, I said that journalists are not supposed to be stenographers, and yet when it comes down to it, in most circumstances, in whatever conflict we may be in, there are stenographers for whichever party is aligning with the American State Department and the interests of the West in general. And Israel happens to be the one in this ongoing conflict.
But it's interesting that you call me a propagandist, because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got bombed.
I'm a propagandist.
Well, no,
For the record.
I'm not calling
I'm
you
a
that.
propagandist.
I'm just saying. I'm going to play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay, well then I want to.
I'm saying I am.
I just
before
want to put
you even play it.
What's he doing? At least he admits to being a propaganda. I mean, you can make an argument that isn't all trying to convince people propaganda. If you have a position, you're trying to advocate for that. Is that propaganda? If you want to define it like that, then yeah, propaganda is neutral. But to me, propaganda always, there's an element of falseness in it, right? It's not, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's not a good definition. But to me, if you're talking about propaganda, that means that there's some dishonesty or misrepresentation or something like that there, not just that you're advocating for a particular position.
Okay, I'm going to play the clip. This is your reaction to the bombing of the hospital the other night.
While I was in the process of getting ready for the stream, Israel enacted one of the singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming.
To be fair to Hasan, though, most major news organisations, Channel 4, the BBC, they all jumped to it. And again, I understand that Israel bombed hospitals before. There was an explosion. Oh God, sorry, there was a hospital explosion. You know, I understand it, but the news shouldn't do that. They shouldn't go, well, you know, they've done it before, so it must be them. Like, they need to check. You need more info. Just wait. I don't understand what's actually cost from going, hey, a hospital's gone up. We're not sure exactly why yet. There are competing claims. Israel has denied that it's fired the missile.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming on air too. And I took a position based probably on 30 years of being a journalist, including running major newspapers, working at CNN and others, of waiting, of just saying, I think we should just wait and see what has actually happened here, get clarification, see who's actually to blame before we start passing judgment. You raced in to assume, as many people did, by the way, including the New York Times, BBC.
I actually think Hasan might be about to get dressed down. I'm not a fan of Piers Morgan. Some people despise him. I don't despise him, but I've never been a fan of his, right? But I think he is going to, like, grill. I think he's going to give Hasan a bit of a dressing down for leaping to conclusions from a kind of perspective as a serious journalist. I'd say he's borderline between serious journalist and hack, but still.
Mainstream media and, of course, most of the Arab world then followed that this was clearly, indisputably, an Israeli airstrike on this hospital. And yet all the evidence now suggests very strongly that it wasn't, that in fact this was a rocket that misfired coming from a terrorist group inside Gaza. So my question for you is this. Why would you
I wouldn't go that far,
why
Piers.
would you be so certain?
Well, to be fair, Hasan has got a point. We still don't know 100%, but that is generally where the preponderance of evidence is coming down. So we don't know 100%.
In what you said.
But at least, I mean, I think that might be performative, but if it's not, at least good on Hasan for maybe learning a lesson. I doubt it, though. I doubt it very much.
Before you knew.
Okay. So, first and foremost, before we get started on this conversation, let's understand something very important here. There's no electricity in Gaza. Internet is patchy in Gaza. There's no food in Gaza. There's no water in Gaza. This is all by design. This is because Gaza is under a brutal blockade, a brutal occupation by the Israeli government. Okay? So that plays a role in the fog of war and the misinformation that gets spread. Having said that, however,
it was Israel's fault that Hasan leapt to conclusions. It was their fault. I don't think he can't be blamed.
You made it seem as though there is a certainty that this was 100% not an Israeli airstrike.
No, I didn't. And instead, I literally just said it's not a certainty.
Okay, sorry.
I said the evidence is increasingly pointing to this not being an Israeli airstrike, and that is expert evidence from people who have no skin in the game at all.
Yes. Well, I don't know which expert you're talking about, because I think Channel 4 did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact, I would say Channel 4 did probably the best job so far in analyzing everything that the IDF has said. But 100%. The reason why I believed, and I still do believe, that the likelihood is that this was an Israeli bombing campaign wasn't only because of the singular verifiable video, the phone video from the balcony that had all of the markings of an airstrike. The fact that the Israeli Air Force was enacting a bombing campaign in the region at the time, according to the Al Jazeera live streaming footage that everyone is using but doesn't understand. The fact that the digital media person for the IDF immediately came out and said that this was actually an airstrike that hit a Hamas target and that he was sad.
This wasn't actually a media spokesman. I looked this up at the time. Assuming you're talking about the same person, because I saw people posting, look, this media spokesman for the government. It was a writer for, like, the Times of Israel or something. It was a journalist.
That there were, casualties at the end of the day, but this was a Hamas target and celebrated it. And more importantly, I guess, the fact that this hospital had been bombed by Israel. This hospital had been bombed by Israel on Saturday. 22 hospitals have, as a matter of fact, been bombed by Israel since this last saga in the occupation. And this hospital had been bombed directly by Israel, where the cancer ward was destroyed. Israel has been bombing all of these hospitals. Israel has been calling all of these hospitals to evacuate over and over and over again. The medical professionals at the hospital had been called by the Israeli government the day prior, and everyone on the ground assumes that this is an Israeli airstrike. They are the ones who experienced the situation.
Listen, Hasan,
so when you have
but the
every
truth
single,
is,
can I just finish this?
if you watch the BBC, if you watch the
Can I-
BBC account of all this last night, by their Verify unit, which was specifically set up by the BBC to be completely dispassionate in these investigations. And they reached a pretty clear conclusion based on circumstantial evidence, I'll make that clear, that this would not have been an Israeli airstrike, including, for example, the size of the crater, which bears no relation to the size of craters normally left by Israeli. So, look, my point is, neither of us know for sure. But you took to your airwaves immediately because actually you're, I wouldn't even say unconscious bias, you're admitting.
He's nailing him down here. This is quite good.
Propagandist bias on your part was that you wanted that to be an Israeli airstrike. It suited your narrative. And I would say that that in itself, in its way,
wanted it to be an
is being a
Israeli airstrike.
stenographer. Well,
It's a certain way of phrasing it, okay? So I understand what he's like, okay, I don't think Hasan, if you were like, hey, Hasan, push a button and Israel will bomb a hospital. But I think you read something like that and there's a hunger to blame Israel. There's a desire then that you have someone to blame. Again, like what Hasan said, has got a point in the sense that, yeah, they've bombed other hospitals. It's not that unbelievable.
you know, you accuse me of being a stenographer. I try and be fair and get to the truth. In your case, I don't think you try to do that. I think you appeal to your audience, appeal to your base, and you don't really care whether the facts are there or not.
This is entirely unfair because you just said circumstantial evidence favors that this was not an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I gave you all of the circumstantial evidence that it does favor that this is an Israeli airstrike. The reason why, however, circumstantial evidence is not enough. And the one thing that I will concede to, because when more information did come out, and no, I do not mean when Israel said that they did not bomb this hospital and it was actually Hamas, and then they turned around and went, never mind, it's not Hamas, it's actually Islamic Jihad. And then they said, we have more evidence coming out in a couple hours. And then the evidence came out, and it turns out it sounded like the phone conversations that they were able to intercept, supposedly, sounded like, by experts at the very least, to be completely false and completely made up.
Yeah, but Hasan, I don't think, listen, in all honesty, I don't think even as you're saying all this, I think you're a smart guy.
Piers, let me finish.
Yeah. Do you see what, like now, Piers, and to be like, and anyone sensible is saying that the preponderance of evidence, it seems like it was a misfiring rocket. But no one's going, right, now we know it's a misfiring rocket. Everyone lied. Typical, well, I mean, Mark Regev was, but obviously. Right, typical, everyone's blaming Israel. It's obvious, right? No, you should maintain caution. It looks like it wasn't Israel. They've bombed at the hospitals. Maybe it was. Currently, the evidence is pointing to it probably wasn't. We don't know enough to make a decision.
You've looked at all of this, and I think in your heart, you know this was probably not an Israeli airstrike. And I'm just curious why you would, instead of admitting that as facts change,
that is
your
not what I'm
opinion
saying.
changed.
That is not what I'm saying at all.
I don't understand why you would double and treble down when the evidence is pointing the other way.
Because he's dishonest and he cares about views more than having integrity. This is one of the worst things. Hasan's not like an evil person. But one of the worst things about having people like Hasan be some of the biggest politics people online is that they lack integrity. And they will say whatever they lack. It's not just like both integrity, and they also will just leap to conclusions and run with a narrative and get excited. So they don't have. So first of all, they don't have the. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have enough caution with stories, because if it seems to validate what they're saying, boom, they're going to run with it. It's all content, right? And this is kind of the thing. Oh shit, something's happened. It's content. I better run with it. I better have a tape that's going to get me the most views. I'm not saying he thinks about it this consciously, but this is where his incentives are. And then he doesn't have the integrity afterwards to then admit he's wrong. He just wants to grandstand and obfuscate and try and weasel his way out of it so he doesn't lose too much clout with his followers.
To be on your show, do you want to talk?
Yes.
If you're asking me to be on your show, and I want to be on the show, thank you so much for having me on your show. Let me explain exactly what I said, and let me explain to you why I think still, to this very moment, until there is a third-party investigation that is concluded by the UN, the International Criminal Court, or specifically a forensic analyst that that looks at the situation is allowed to be on the ground. This is not just my perspective. This is B'Tselem as well, which is an Israeli organization that has also demanded a third-party investigation occur. I am not going to conclusively say that this was not Israel's fault.
I don't expect you to.
Because I just gave you, and not because I'm a propagandist.
Yeah, but he's trying to get you to say what he said. He's trying to get Hasan to just say what Piers was saying, which is that the current state of evidence makes it look very much like it probably wasn't an Israeli rocket. We don't know, but that's where the evidence is currently leading, right? So why can't Hasan just say this? Because he seems to now have that position, basically. But now he's trying to say, no, you're trying to tell me that I have to, you're trying to tell me now that I have to say it definitely wasn't, when Piers hasn't said that himself.
Me being a propagandist goes, everyone is a propagandist. I'm just honest about it. You're a propagandist. We have our biases.
I'm curious who you think I'm a propagandist for.
Honest about my biases.
Who do you think I'm a propagandist for?
Who do I think you're a propagandist for? Whichever every media person is doing propaganda.
I could not answer that, could he? Who are you doing propaganda? Well, every media person is doing propaganda is usually for someone or for something.
Who for? I've got to be doing it for somebody.
You think it's a bad word? I don't. That's just the difference. This is a semantics
I do. I think it's actually quite a serious charge.
Hasan,
I think it's a serious charge to level, not on a podcast.
Again, you'd usually feel like propaganda had connotations of being bad. And I kind of even wonder if now Hasan's weaseling out of it, just to not offend Piers, because he's like, shit, I can get on Piers Morgan. I better be nice to him, so he has me on again. And I'm not 100% accusing him of that, because again, I don't know. But I do fucking wonder.
But as a journalist who's broadcasting around the world, who has a reputation, I believe, for being fair and impartial, actually, on these issues, it's quite a charge to just say, I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I'm doing the propaganda for.
While we're having this conversation, 3,000... Piers, while we're having this back and forth, 3,800 and...
Change the subject. You notice that? Look. He totally did the politician thing and just changed the subject. Piers says it reckon. Who do you think I'm a propagandist for? Well, Piers, while we're sitting here talking...
I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I'm doing the propaganda for.
While we're having this conversation, 3,000... Piers, while we're having this back and forth, 3,840 Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in the last incursion into Gaza. I feel like this is an incredibly selfish, self-centered conversation to have.
No!
Asked me to be on here. You wanted to hear my perspective. I'm willing to give it to you. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Noam Chomsky style manufacturing consent conversations about how the media is operating in the behest of capital.
You were the guy. Listen, you were the guy that called me.
There are dead people.
Listen, Hasan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon.
Like, you know when you're at school and you start making excuses to the teacher? No, but Mitch, you don't understand, because actually, like, it wasn't me, it was Stephen. He was, if anything, he was really doing... Hasan, please.
Listen, Hasan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon in a suit. I was curious as to why. You don't want to say who I'm doing the propaganda for. We'll move on.
Some of this is gold.
Move on. I agree with you. There's a bigger picture here. Let's move on. Let's take a short break. Hasan, let's take a short break. I want to come back. I want to talk to you about what happened on October the 7th, get your reaction to that. Welcome back. Hasan Piker is still with me. Hasan, I want to just play you a clip of something that you said about the October 7th terror attacks, and in particular, the attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hasan, that you are in some ways...
Eventually, when you realize open-air prison your whole day happened on its happen.
The attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, like, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there,
excuse
Hasan.
it. Otherwise, that kind of excuses everything. Like, again, the Israelis vote for right-wing governments that do crimes against the Palestinians because they're constantly under threat of terrorism. Everything that both sides do is explicable. It just doesn't justify it.
No, I wouldn't say that they had it coming. I think that Michael Brooks used to say, analysis is not justification. And while obviously civilian casualties and horrific barbaric acts that were committed on October 7 are completely unacceptable, the important thing to make sure that it never happens again is to analyze what are the conditions as to how it happened to begin with. And I think Ehud Barak is going to be on in a little bit as well, or maybe he's on before me. Yeah. And I'm almost certain that while he has held the keys to the conversation and held the levers of the power in this conversation in many key and critical points, I would go so far as to say that he is among many others who also recognize that the Bibi Netanyahu administration is responsible. This is not just my assessment. This is 85% of the Israeli population's assessment at the time. This is years and years and years of refusing to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority. Don't take my word for it. Take Bibi Netanyahu's personal word for it. In 2019, in a closed-door conversation with Likud members, he said that if you want to thwart any kind of Palestinian nation state, you must do everything you can to only negotiate with Hamas. We control how high the fire goes. He has given cash to Hamas by way of Qatar. There is no bigger fan of Hamas than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe interview.
I think that's silly. People keep saying, like, oh, he's a big fan. No, they thought, which was stupid. I don't know why anyone would have thought that for some reason Israel thought they could use Hamas years ago to drive a wedge between Palestinians. They thought they were a good counterbalance to the PLO, which is fucking insane. So again, I'm scared of next door's dog, so I've got a tiger. Yeah, it's going to tear you to shreds, mate.
And then you'll ask him to.
No, I actually did interview him a few months ago, and I did actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview, than Israelis, and what he intended to do about it. He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility, which is now this hot phrase in this whole crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a
well, let
question?
me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu when they would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a question?
Well, let me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace. And I think it has fractured society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer for his government. My question for you, I think, is this, is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively, I mean, I don't even call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gazans.
This is why I call you a propagandist.
I'm just saying the phraseology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and
but it's not
so on and so on. I get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't...
Okay, but wait, hold on. A minute ago, he just said that Israel is occupying it, right? This is the problem. They don't use right terminology. Israel's occupying the West Bank. It's not occupying Gaza. It is putting Gaza under siege. This is bad. This is something that's been doing my head in for a while on this issue, and a lot of issues generally. That there are a lot of. I think this is worse on the left, where they'll just use a series of words that don't really apply well, right? Like they call what's going on in Gaza a genocide. It's really bad. It's not genocide. Even the use of apartheid, which I agree does make sense. I think it's as silly to call it an apartheid, but even there, it is materially different. It's not quite the same thing. But I don't think it's necessarily, and certainly what goes on the West Bank's no better. But I just don't understand why they have to use these other words that are either exaggerating or in some cases, like, it's not even necessarily better than what they're talking about. It's just not that thing. Like, it's something different.
That's why they call it the world's largest open air
prison. Yeah, but Hasan, I don't disagree with you. And I've pointed this out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen, where 1,400 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded, it was reported, and so on. If we can't look at that collectively with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find that the tribalism on both sides is now so toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors.
He's spot on that.
Right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks that precipitated this. And I find that really hard, right? Really hard to accept.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay, here's what I would honestly say about that. Is Israel not allowed to defend itself from the worst terror?
Okay, now here's the bigger voice. I'm trying to whistle this way out of that. It's an important question because it's like, what do Israel actually do? Because when I sit here criticising them, and then it's like, well, what are they actually supposed to do? Because remember, in any democratic country, it's impossible to have an attack like that and not respond militarily. You can wish it was different. You can wish humans were different. I promise you, it doesn't matter where in the world we are, something like that happens, there's going to be demand for a military response amongst the people. So how do you conduct that? In a situation like Gaza, what do you do? I mean, I think probably not bombing schools and hospitals and refugees, but then, okay, what do you do? Like, it's a real tough one, to be fair.
Attack we've seen since 9/11. Is it not allowed to defend itself
it's just odd.
after 1,400 people in Israel are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are able to defend themselves, as any free democratic country,
that is the
then
Israeli
the question
State
becomes,
Department line.
Hasan,
that is the IDF's line. That is the line that everyone
Hasan, let me ask
channeled.
you this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves? If their mission now is to get rid of Hamas, a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No.
It's not even listening to him. Like, it looked like he's just looking at his feelers. Like, it wasn't
the
even
worst
listening.
acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that.
It looked like he
isn't
was
it?
looking at his phone then.
I'm
sorry.
That is committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim,
I realise I do that on stream, but sometimes. But come on.
Then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
He's still doing it now.
A terror organisation that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen. If that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's ongoing. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news and
Since when? In all fucking channels, him covering breaking news. It's when was this a Hasan policy? Has anyone? That's it. Has anyone seen Hasan go, hey, let's wait and see. Let's wait, everyone. Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone, listen. Right, I know it looks like something's happened that confirms all of our biases, but let's not jump to conclusions. I'm not even going to cover this until we know what's going on. Can anyone find me an example of Hasan saying that? Because I've never fucking seen it.
Sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So
what? Wait, he's now trying to have it both ways. So 1 minute he's just a harmless idiot, you know, doing his Twitch stream, throwing his ideas out into the ether, and also he does a better job of most news outlets at covering this kind of stuff. Oh, how did he do that? How did he start of the sentence he's an idiot and, you know, you don't need to take anything said seriously, but he also does it at the end of the sentence is him doing a better job than most news outlets.
So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, you know, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization, calls the permit regime, where every waking moment of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank are absolute hell, where they have no legal recourse. 51 Palestinians have died, and that was before the Ramallah protest that happened last night, and the Israeli forces were opening up with live fire on protesters last night. So who knows what that death toll has become? This is all a product of Israel being an apartheid state. This is a violent apartheid state. There is no way to be a peaceful
Hasan,
apartheid
let me ask you
state.
this.
It is a violence. It is a violence required for its maintenance.
Okay, listen.
And that violence is frustrating people.
I hear you.
That violence is radicalizing people.
But here's
Hold on.
I hear
as far as Israel, as far as what Benjamin Netanyahu has done, as far as the war government, what they have done, Piers, going into Gaza and bombing Gaza and killing 3,480 Palestinians so far in Gaza, 1,000 plus children out of all of those casualties. 22 hospitals being bombed, a bakery, the only remaining intact bakery being bombed yesterday. These are horrifying crimes that you would openly say are horrifying and unjustifiable when Russia does it, but when Israel does it, Israel has a right to defend itself. This is identical to the same talking points that I've heard from every Israeli administration official. It's the same talking points that I've heard from American politicians championing the exact same talking points. It's the same thing that I've heard from everyone else in the media. You might have been against the Iraq.
The thing is, a lot of what it's saying isn't even wrong. It's just, what's that got to do with what should Israel do now? Does it have a right to defend itself? How should it defend itself from this kind of terrorism? Well, it's their fault. It's come out of like all of the oppression. Yeah, the oppression's terrible. Israel does terrible things. Of course, that provides. So Israel does a lot of like oppression of Palestinians. Of course, yeah, some of them get fall prey to Hamas and start supporting them. However, right? How is that an answer to the question? What is Israel supposed to do? I mean, I'm not even really sure about that, because I'd be interested to hear his view. He has no idea. He doesn't know what they're supposed to do because he doesn't need to think about it, because no one on his side is ever going to ask what should Israel do in response to this. They're always just going to say, oh, well, you know, this is their fault. Look at the oppression. That's why this has happened. Without ever saying, well, okay, here's what if I was in charge of Israel, I would do.
War, and you use that, but you're using that for evil, in my opinion, at this point. If you are not sitting here and condemning those acts of war crimes, those acts of violence, those acts of collective punishment.
Well, I would say to that I think the death of any child in this conflict is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the question comes down to me that after an act of terror, as we saw on October the 7th, Israel should be able to defend itself and should be able to go after the people that perpetrated.
I wonder if Hasan will answer, or he'll just ramble again. Just ramble and try and obfuscate like a kind of liar politician. Let's see. Let's find out.
Who live amongst civilians in Gaza deliberately.
This time.
And the question for me becomes down to what is proportionate. I don't know the answer, Hasan. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that answer is.
I do know the answer to that. Last night I had Dr. Ofer Kassif, an Israeli Knesset member who was expelled, suspended for 45 days for saying what I believe is the truth. Championing the exact same position of the Haaretz's editorial board. There are a lot of thoughtful people, a lot of formative Holocaust scholars, a lot of historians that all agree on the same point. The reason why violence that even penetrates through the Israeli security blanket that people thought existed, that penetrated through that Iron Dome, the Iron Wall, if you want to call it that, is because of years and years of...
So he's not going to answer, he's just going to repeat himself, and it's because of years and years of repression. Yeah, sure, okay. So what should Israel do then? That was the question. Right? So, therefore, they should... What?
Oppression and years of violence, which is a necessity to maintain an apartheid state. And this has to stop. There's only two ways out of this. Either you engage in full-blown ethnic cleansing, and if you listen to the likes of Smotrich, or if you listen to the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and these very unfavorable, unpopular, far-right figures, if you listen to Netanyahu and his Likud government, they say that they are interested in going in that direction, the ethnic cleansing direction, the ethnic displacement direction, or the only way out of this.
Let's not beat around the bush, okay? I mean, Ben-Gvir, for a start. Ben-Gvir is an absolute lunatic who calls himself a proud fascist. And there's definitely been some kind of genocidally sounding rhetoric out of some Israeli ministers. I don't think they will do a genocide. I do worry. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that rhetoric's not real. I don't understand what that's got to do with what Israel should do, though, which is what Hasan's been asked twice now.
Or a real solution is
to literally doing the politician thing of just going to ramble into a new point.
Move towards peace, to genuinely end the blockade, to end the apartheid, to end the occupation, and create a pathway towards citizenship for all people with a right to return, for all 14 million Palestinians, 5 million of which live under Israeli occupation. It's brutal. And then the rest living in diaspora. These are not unreasonable requests. These are requests that understand the dignity and the humanity of one side and does not simply treat them as their colonial subjects.
Hasan,
and it's the only way to create permanent security and prosperity in the region.
If it was as simple as that, I'm sure that would have happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would probably lead to a genocide of Israelis. This is the problem. It's not easy. Nothing about that situation is easy. It annoys me when right-oids pretend that, it's really easy, Israel's completely right, should just obliterate Gaza. Disgusting. Right? And then when silly leftoids like Hasan go, it's really easy, Israel should just disband and go, we're not going to be a Jewish state anymore, every Palestinian can come live here, let's just fingers crossed they're all nice to us, and most of us can just move back to Europe, because apparently this was one of the weird, I'm not accusing Hasan of this, I haven't seen him do this, but a lot of online leftoids started to become these weird race realists. And then all of a sudden, they're posting things about the percentage of Levantine DNA in the average Jew. Seriously. Talking about skin tones and the rates of skin cancer in Israelis versus Arabs, and how that you can see that means that they don't... Like the weirdest, half expected them to start getting the calipers out and measuring the circumference of the radius of someone's fucking nose. It was insane to see leftoids doing this. but anyway, I'm not accusing Hasan of this, but just again, what the fuck are they supposed to do? I don't even know. It's a real tough one because I'm like, yeah, don't bomb civilians, don't bomb Hamas when they're in a hospital. Well, I mean, not that hospital wasn't bombed, but as we established, others were. But on the other hand, what do they do? I think maybe the only thing I could think, and this is me being some schmuck online, just thinking, is if they signed international, like as in went to America, said we want to do a big, we're not just going to evacuate northern Gaza, we're going to sign a big treaty saying we give cast iron guarantees that people will be allowed back into Gaza. If we don't, we void any right to aid. All treaties are destroyed with the rest of the world, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So in that case, and then do evacuate Gaza, to try and do what you can, do some action against Hamas. Right, don't try. You're not going to be able to eradicate them if you actually let people evacuate. Some Hamas will go with them, so that's not going to work. So evacuate who can be evacuated, but in a way that's more believable to Palestinians that they're going to be allowed back, so that more of them go, and then go in, do an action against Hamas, try and take out a lot of the leadership, and then maybe that's it, and then get round. Okay, so apparently the last section of the Hasan clip got cut out, which is really annoying, but I think it was just like 2 minutes more for me to review. He tried to weasel his way out of everything. He had zero integrity, zero ability to just even go, yeah, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have leapt to conclusions. But he gave these like politician answers to try and evade Piers. Obviously, Hasan's not skilled or experienced enough to like go up against a highly experienced journalist who's going to constantly pull him back to the point. I think he made a fool of himself in a lot of ways. Not a complete fool. I'm not going to be fair. I think Piers was treating him like a little bit with kid gloves, but no, that's not true. He gave him quite a good grilling, but he was doing it in I think Hasan, you know, I mean, I just don't think he did a good job there.